All right, on to item 2.1. Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. This staff report is in regards to recommending the council consider placing a 11-cent transaction use tax on the ballot for November. So, thank you. Older age is, have its impacts. So what we're proposing that the council considers a ballot measure to increase the sales tax that's within the community by 1 cent. Just some of the growth areas that are contributing to this need for additional services, additional funding to provide those services. You can see this is our growth, residential growth since incorporation, about 1.6%. We've got about 32,000 folks up to a little over 36,000 now. This was all brought upon by staff conducting a survey of the community interest survey, and asking the community, the elected representatives, residents of the community, their thoughts about funding additional public safety services. And of that survey, 7 in 10 were in support of providing additional funds for those types of services. Specifically, 38% of those surveyed saw a great need for additional public safety services in the community, and additional 31% saw some need. So in total, you got 69% of those surveyed supported additional funding source for public services and road improvements. Those are the two main popular services that the community was looking forward to. So when this comes up, people say, well, why don't you just use the existing funds that you have? You just got your money back from the motor vehicle license fee, everything should be fine, you're, gold brick streets, you can afford to do these types of things. Well, that's not true. I mean, our revenue, including the funding that was returned after 6.5 years, put us up to the $13.5 million mark. We did increase our service levels for police services, but that's back, we increased them to the 2011 service levels, as you'll see a little bit later when the chief speaks about that. Our reserves, we did have almost $2 million in general fund reserves, and those funds are reserves. And typically, when we go through how we budget, how we utilize our expenditure budgets, of our $14 million expenditure budget for next year, that includes some projects that carried over from the prior year that were not completed. So of that $14 million, 64% of that is spent on public safety, police, fire activities. Community development and public works is approximately 17% of the total expenditures. And what's of note there is that that's user paid. The development community pays for those types of services. In general government, community services, that's another 19% of our total general fund budget. So you look at where are you going to come up with $1.7 million, that would be the equivalent of what an additional sales tax increase would be. Where do we find the $1.7 million to fund those additional fire, police, and road improvement services out of this existing budget? Well, you got almost $2 million in reserves, just use that. That's great, but that only lasts for 1 year. So we don't use the reserves for one-time expenditures, or for ongoing types of expenditures. So we're in a situation where we can afford the service levels of 2011, but going forward, it's going to be a real challenge to keep up with the growth. The council at the February 14th council meeting, that's when the council made the allocation of the motor vehicle license fee replacement funds. That's Senator Roth was here tonight. We were celebrating that the check did clear. How are we going to allocate the funds? And the council asked the departments, how should we spend this money? And the departments came back with a wish list of $6.9 million. Well, we only have 2.3 to spend, so we're short. So what the council ultimately came forward with was funding an increase in police levels from the 40 hours that we were currently experiencing up to the 70 hours of service a day. Well, that's the same service levels that we had in 2011. The fire station, the fire chief recommended make some improvements at the fire station and bring on the services of a fire marshal to help out with weed abatement activities, local plan check for the development community, make life a little easier for the residents here dealing with fire issues of that nature. So the council funded that activity. We also set aside $1 million of that $2.3 million for our reserves to bring us up to that $2 million level. And now we are at a 15% level, which is a good position to be in for a city of our size and a budget of our size. City council also authorized the repair of a number of streets in town, adding $50,000 towards that. We also increased public works, $250,000. We authorized shade structures to be built at the parks for $50,000, and the video streaming to bring that to the public for the public meetings for $60,000. Some of those projects have carried over from last year into this year. That's where you get the carryover number. That was for the $14 million. So we took those funds that were available for one-time uses and for recurring and adequately distributed those. Well, what did that do for public safety levels? This is looking at our police department's spending levels since city's incorporation through 2017. When we incorporated in 2008, 2009, we spent about $3.9 million on police services, and that included 2 motor officers that we had, which provided additional traffic services. And then as time went on, then we went through the Great Recession, and then you can see when Sacramento pulled the rug out from under us, the sheriff's department took the bulk of that reduction, going from 70 hours of service down to 40. So we've slowly been building that up due to cost increase, basically. It's not service level increase. It wasn't until last year when you increased it up to the 70 hours of service level, and then this year's budget being, or last year's budget bringing it up to $3.4 million. But you look at the $3.4 million of fiscal year 17-18, compare that to the first year of incorporation, $3.9 million. And you saw on the first charts the population increase, 1.6% per year, but it's had an inverse impact on police spending. So we're kind of going the wrong way. So how do we right that direction? To help with that, I will introduce our police chief, Dan Ann, to describe the needs of the police department within this community for now and the near future. Chief?
Thank you. Before I get into this part of the presentation, a couple of quick comments I forgot to make before, or reference some comments from the audience. I wanted to remind the citizens, if they do have quality of life issues or homeless related issues, continue to encourage to call when they're happening so we can come out. The 776-1099 for non-emergency, or of course 911 for emergency. Also, if you have ongoing issues, you want extra patrol requests, you can do that by calling our station at 951-245-3300. And what we do is we get those on a regular basis, and it helps us monitor hotspots that the citizens are seeing that we don't necessarily see from the statistics, and helps us to be able to better put that information out to our patrol officers so that when they do have any free time, they can know exactly where that time is best spent. And to Mr. Mays' comment about coffee with cops, I think it's a fantastic idea. I love coffee. I will make a date, and we will do that probably in August. I'll look at my calendar, look for the notices to that to come on Facebook and the city's webpage.
Be happy to join you too.
All right, we can do something in conjunction. Sounds great. So I wanted to talk about past, present, and future. Where we started. So as Gary mentioned back in 2008-ish, I'm going to give you equivalent sworn officers. We talk about service hours, but that kind of equates to a certain full-time equivalent officer, and then you add those supported detectives, sergeants, lieutenants that rate drives, and including up to myself, and it gives you kind of a number of sworn officers. Many agencies do a 1 per 1,000 ratio as a guideline. It's not there's no standard, there's no right number or wrong number. It's a guideline of where agencies want to be sometimes to gauge their staffing. So city population was approximately 28,000, give or take, in 2008, and our ratio per 1,000 was about 0.89. At that point, we had some special teams and voters and things like that initially. That went down pretty quickly. And in 2009 to 2011, we dropped to 20 sworn staff, which is basically the 70 hours of service that you're seeing plus the supported staff, and that ratio was at that time about 0.65. So where have we been? The last 7 years, equivalent of 11 sworn staff is where we pretty much were when we went down to 40 after we lost that BLF funding. And that gives us, at that time, city population between those years of 32,700 to a little over 36,000. That ratio then was about 0.34, 0.31, somewhere in that range, just to give a guideline where we see where we're at. Where are we at now? We've restored that 70 hours, that equivalent to 20 sworn officers. Our city's population has risen at an average of, like Gary said, 1.6% per year. We're probably right around 36, a little under 37,000 per the E1 report. And that ratio is about up to 0.54. Now, what's the number? There's no magic number. County Sheriff's goal back in the time was 0.75. We got up to 0.1 was the goal. We were at 1.1 for a short time in the times when times were really good. I can tell you that the Sheriff's sworn staffing levels have dropped as well based on budget cuts in the county and are probably similar to where we're at, and it's very difficult to meet a demand when you do not have a supply. Here's a little chart that just kind of outlines what I was talking about. It shows kind of your population and your staffing levels, just kind of different way of what I was just explaining to you before. So you can see, as Gary said, normal cities, this is very good for population to grow. Accordingly, you should grow your resources and your staffing at all agencies to meet those population demands, as that creates more work, especially in public safety. So some of the budgetary challenges were the VLF funds taken from us. Our levels of service decreased, at the time, 1.3 million. We reduced our hours, and then we raised those, we restored those funds just recently, 2018. Some performance measures I just want to point out to you. If you can see on the screen, in 2008 we had approximately a little under 9,000 calls for service. In 2010, we're about 14,000 calls for service. 2017, 18,000 calls for service plus. It's a normal trend that's expected as we grow with more people. They need more services, etc. Response time increases, those typically change because as the levels do not grow, we're going to see slight increases. Now our priority ones, which are emergency calls, are always going to be very consistent across the board because we drop things and it's usually just driving time. But where you see the big delays is in our priority 2s, 3s, and 4s, which are the bulk of the calls that people get when they found out their house was burglarized, etc., etc. So those wait times have drastically increased. I just picked a few years. 2010, for example, priority 3s were a little over 28 minutes from the time you call dispatch to the time a deputy arrives. In 2017, almost 50 minutes, and right now trending year to date, our average is a little over 53. So just looking at performance measures, looking at increased traffic collisions. As you get more people on the road driving around, you're going to get more issues. In 2010, we had 29 injury traffic collisions, 1 fatality. 2013, we had 34 injuries and 3 fatalities, 3 fatal accidents, I should say. And 2017, we had 50 injuries and 4 fatal accidents. Again, we have no dedicated traffic or motors to offset any of these things. So as we know, when we have motor officers or traffic officers, studies after studies after studies have shown Nobody likes tickets, but tickets drive down accidents and ultimately keep people safer. So these are some of the challenges and performance measures. Some of the contributing challenges here are California legislation. I won't go into it because I did with my other presentation, but those AB 109, 47, and 57 have increased our quality of life issues. Again, we have no community service officers, problem-oriented policing officers, POP or hot team officers to focus or deal with these. We have patrol hours and patrol service, which takes priority for those calls for service, leaving us not a lot of extra time or focused patrol for some of these special needs that all cities typically have. So future goals, as you talk about thinking, what to do as we grow, and if there is money, I would say increase the service levels to reflect the growth. Consider adding maybe dedicated traffic or motor officers to deal with traffic safety issues. Consider adding dedicated POP or HOT type teams to mitigate any of our quality of life issues, or like we had talked about homeless issues on a regular basis, rather than spot checking when we can, or having our patrol officers pulled away from calls to try to deal with these trespass issues. And maybe even increase of community service officers, which are very, very helpful for us. They handle a lot of non-emergency type things, traffic accidents, transporting criminals. It saves the officers tons of time, and those things also help us in the long run. They can go to community events, show up at different things that most cities like to see our cops at. So just budget goals as consideration, just to give you an idea, annual cost for motor officers, dedicated special teams, or additional 10 hours of patrol equivalent. It's all probably about each one of those things is $342,000 approximately annually to support those things. Community service officers, $132,000 annually. These are all approximate numbers. Of course, each year we have rate increases and things that fluctuate within 5% or so. So once this additional funding, if it ever materializes, of course, we would sit down with subcommittees, be recommendations by the police chief, and we would come up with the best need at the time for the budgets that are available in order to tackle some of these problems. So some benefits I listed obviously are able to increase patrol to help mitigate crime in population, increase citizen and officer safety in the process. Some of the key ones are the POP or HOT officers to deal with these quality of life issues. That's very, very important. As you heard some of the citizens today, we're losing business in the city. We are part of the problem, are part of the solution, but when we have our officers out there with more focused patrol, along with getting more funding for people like SWAG, which are crucial, they've helped us so much, for long-term solutions and city, that's what we need. Motor officers to handle these traffic issues. We communicate on a regular basis with traffic issues around our schools. It's very instrumental to have a motor officer zip through the traffic and quell some traffic safety around schools. These things come up from time to time. We just don't have those resources to throw at it. And of course, it will reduce response times, in theory, more proactive patrol time for our officers, and hopefully reduce citizen complaints. So these aren't hard concepts, but these are definitely important concepts. And I hope that if the citizens choose to go this route, that we'll sit down and get our police department up to where we should be, that the city is proud of it, so are the citizens. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation, but I surely will answer any questions, take any comments before I leave the podium.
Questions, comments?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
In looking back at the present materials that the Chief presented, I mean, it's incredible that in 2008 we had 8,854 calls for service. In 2017 we had 18,367. And that's over 100% increase. And our population did not increase 100%. And the demand that's being placed on our services is just no wonder why it's taking so long to respond to these activities. Following up with that will be Chief Jeff Pemberton from Cal Fire and our local fire department, and going forward with recommendation for increasing public services. You know the issues we've been having with fire and response times and east side, west side of the freeway. And Chief, why don't you go ahead and fill us in?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me tonight. Chief Phillips is away on vacation, so I get the distinguished pleasure to be with you tonight. I have a quick PowerPoint and be glad at the end to take any questions. So one of the things that we did as your fire department is we looked at the historical data over the years, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but we didn't just come up with random ideas of how we could spend additional revenue should that take place. We have a need. We've had a need for a while. We've been very fortunate on the fire side of public safety that we haven't lost anything, but we only have one engine within the community. So I'll get a little bit more into details of why that's a factor. So one of the things besides historical data was the physical drive time from the fire station to the actual calls. That's the metric that we use to make sure that we're efficiently delivering fire service to our residents and our customers. One of the guiding documents that we use was not only a county-wide fire master plan that included all of our partner cities, as well as a strategic fire plan, and then just recently the standards of cover that was also completed. And all those documents together help us come to the conclusion that we did of what is still needed. As well as using the NIST study from the Department of Commerce and weighing in on some of the particular sections of the National Fire Protection Association where it applies. So when we look back from incorporation to today, we've increased nearly 42% in call volume. That's a pretty substantial increase without any additional units to handle that volume. So what that equates to on the fire side, and what you see in this graph, is only our emergency incidents, not the help somebody off the floor, not the fire alarm that may be chirping or stuff like that. These are true emergencies where through our call triage and dispatch, we have determined that they're priority calls. And you can see that we have a 4-minute goal to get on scene within 80% of the time. It's a pretty reasonable goal. That's a goal that's established pretty much nationwide in urbanized areas. We are not meeting that 4-minute drive time. In 2016, we were at 53%, and in 2017, we didn't meet it 57% of the time. That's a pretty significant number. Now when we look at, and this goes back to the number of resources that we have available within the community, when we look at that same metric for the 4-minute drive time, and we add in additional calls, and that's kind of why our numbers jump up so high. When the closest unit is not available, i.e. engine 61, and we have to go to the neighboring resource, our drive time obviously increases because they're either coming from Lake Elsinore, the county area, or one of our mutual aid partners, i.e. Murrieta. This graphic shows our current 4-minute drive time based upon actual speed limits on the surface streets, or the speed limit that would be required for that street. And you can see the two hotspots that look kind of like a sun, and they actually have multi-colors in them. Those are our two spots that the majority of our calls are occurring at. So when we look at that 4-minute drive time from 61 and the amount of calls not only that are down the street, but out of that 4-minute drive time, we're not meeting it there ever, and that City Hall is one of those areas. One of our proposals at the budget workshop was to acquire land and start looking at relocating Station 61 to the more northern portion of the city, and also look at land on the east side of the city that would balance out our response times citywide, just as a part of that long-term strategic goal. So what we're proposing today to be able to reduce those long drive times is adding an additional unit. That unit would be a 2-person paramedic squad. We would be able to reconfigure some of our current staffing that we have today, and it would only be an increase for that unit of personnel costs of $700,000 a year, give or take. It's going to decrease our response time, increase our depth of resources to be able to handle those back-to-back calls, and also provide additional firefighters so that we can enter IDLH or hazardous environments without waiting for another unit to arrive from one of those neighboring stations. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the council?
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I just have one. You show us the response times and everything. Does AMR system, the ambulance, what is their response times? Do you know?
I would, specifically for them, I would
Yeah,
have
for-
to call and make a
for-
request for what the response times are.
So that's not judged inside of your stuff, it's just your stuff only?
Correct.
Because I know they're in the area, and I know they've run a lot of those calls too. I was just kind of curious of what theirs is. Because I know they overlap with you guys constantly to try to...
No, they absolutely do, and together as a partnership, we're obviously
Right.
trying to obtain that best response time. But I'll give you some situations that happened this winter, specifically with not only AMR, but Southern California. They were running out of ambulances. They didn't have any more ambulances to put on the road. We had calls in Moreno Valley where we were waiting 45 minutes for an ambulance.
Wow.
That happened in Menifee. That happened in this community without diving into the details and pulling those specific calls. That's one of the reasons why we have a tiered response, and we have fire engines strategically located and much more depth of resources within the fire department to be able to handle those calls.
So that's one reason the new response, that other truck that you're talking about with the paramedics on it. Because I see you guys roll out every day. I live right around the corner from you, so that thing is never here.
No,
It's
it's not.
always gone, all day long. It comes by my house. But yeah, and I always say, man, that's hard to run a truck like that all day long.
It is. It's a much more efficient model. With our call triaging that we've implemented over the few years that I've talked about before, there are a lot, if not, well, I can say off the top of my head, there's 20% of the calls that thing, the paramedic squad would handle without the
Right, exactly.
which reduces a whole lot of additional costs that drive up the maintenance and other factors of the fire engine going to those calls.
Okay. Thank you for your information, it's good.
So the 3,266 calls for FY 17-18,
Mhm.
is that pulled from Wildomar addresses, like as far as like those being the destination of the calls?
Those are all calls within the city of
Okay,
Wildomar,
okay.
regardless of what
Where it comes,
apparatus went to,
yeah.
whether it was the county engine from
Yeah,
La Cresta, one of the Lake Elsinore engines, the Menifee engine, because there's certain portions as you see
Yeah.
those where they're handling some of those calls as well.
now when we talk about the 4-minute response time, are we talking just Station 61 making it to anywhere in the city? Or are we talking, I forgot the station number off Merida Road? 616. You know, if we have something in the farm, where it makes more sense to send that truck, is this closer, or, you know, they're,
We always use the closest
Okay.
resource regardless of what the door sticker is. That's a part of what we believe is the best model that we've got
Yeah.
in California. We worry about those details and the inequities that may occur or may not occur, but together it allows us to be able to have a better service. And one thing I think that we should note is we also, when we were looking at these drive times, we looked at Murrieta's, because there had been a question before of if we had an automatic aid agreement with Murrieta, would that help us? Well, even without a dispatch delay, because we would have that, as you well know, you gotta pick up the phone and call them because we're not connected via a network. That in and of itself, if they were dispatched by us, would not buy us anything on the south end of the city, believe it or not.
I have a question. But we pay a portion of 75, and there goes Clint Key, so how does that fit into the?
So that's why adding this particular vehicle would only cost us a little under $700,000. We would bring those resources back into the city and utilize that staffing to balance out the remainder of the people that we would need to staff that unit.
Okay, but was their response time included, or you're only going from 61 per minute?
The response time from those other stations?
Yeah, I mean, if 75 is first in and it's on Clint Key, I'm just curious how that factored into the 4 minute.
The one thing, once we put that unit on the road, and I was just talking to Chief Phillips about it, we would probably put it at 61 for 6 months and see how much it benefited some of those hotspots, because we have had some changes in occupancies to what those call volumes were going to.
Right.
And then move it maybe to 75 for another 6 months and see what benefited us in the city overall.
Well, it's busy because but it's all cooperative because 68 comes in and serves us, but 61 serves the track.
Right, absolutely.
So it's,
In between Wildomar, Lake Elsinore, and Menifee, in looking at the data, there's not a lot of inequities in our responses. Between the larger responses that require multiple units and the day-to-day calls that we're handling for some of our other neighboring cities, it's pretty fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. So, we went through the survey, the community said they would support additional funding. We've heard from the departments. This is the need that should be satisfied here in the community. So those surveys said that yes, they will pay additional funds to have those higher levels of service. So how do we do that? So staff went back and looked at the various options for generating revenue to pay for these services. And typically you look at a utility users tax, in which you put a fee on everybody's utility bills and use those funds. That's a good tax in the sense that all those funds come right back to your community. Sacramento doesn't touch any of that. And the other side of it is an utility users tax. All the residents and businesses end up paying for all these new services that are being enjoyed by not only the residents, but by also those folks that aren't residents. People traveling through town are still using those services, but not having to pay for them. So then we looked at a transient occupancy tax or a hotel tax, which only the guests pay the tax. So those folks coming and staying in a hotel in Wildomar, they pay the tax. That benefits the residents, it benefits the non-residents. The non-residents and the residents aren't paying for it, so it's a good deal. We don't have a hotel. So in the future, that'll happen. But right now, that's not there. So I'm going to look at the sales tax. Sales tax on goods sold in the community. It's at 1 cent of the 7.75% tax. One of those pennies comes back to the city already. So we're looking to increase that by 1 more. Okay, Temecula did it. Menifee has done it. Murrieta is considering doing it. And what they've done with those funds is they too have put it into needed services in the community. And they control it all. Sacramento can't grab that and take that away from us. We control our destiny with those funds. So we look at the sales tax. It's partially paid for by the residents who shop in town. And it's partially paid for by those non-residents who do business or pass through town or stop at our gas stations. And we go down to Temecula and we shop in their malls, we're giving them that extra sales tax. Okay? It's not benefiting us, because it's benefiting those cities. So a sales tax amongst these 3 locally controlled type taxes looks about the most fair and equitable method to generate the funds to pay for these additional public safety services. And of that, all of these things are locally controlled, and there's no Sacramento strings attached to these things. So it's staff's recommendation that we be looking at a sales tax increase, accompanied with a resolution for how we would spend these monies. Now we'd be generating about $1.7 million based on our current sales tax revenues. So we generate about $1.7 million. So we've attached a resolution to your package tonight. And that would say our spending priorities would be police, fire, homeless programs, road improvements. Those are the main categories that would be paid for with this new funding. We'd also recommend that we have an oversight committee to make sure that $1.7 million was spent in these areas on these additional services to increase the lifestyle, the service levels in the community. So that is in your package for consideration also. The tonight's action is twofold. It's to review the consideration of putting an item on the ballot for the sales tax measure, and secondly, to review the resolution that would establish the spending priorities should this sales tax increase be approved at the ballot in November. So that concludes our presentation for the evening, and staff's available to address your comments and questions. Thank you.
All right, with that, we're going to open up the public hearing and take our public comment at this time. Start with Gina Castanon.
We still have to keep it to the 2 minutes? Okay, so, this survey, the community needs to understand that you approved $91,000 to come up with this survey. This 7 out of 10 people that are in favor of this 1 penny sales tax, this survey only covered 900 people out of a community of 36,000 people. So what about the CFDs? You're going to stop doing that on new developments? Why are you doing road maintenance when we have gas tax? Why are you doing homelessness when we have grants? Now, the levels dropped in 2009 and 2011. You were still getting VLF fees. So why did they fall then? So you want to, we can only bring them back to 2011? Just bring them back to 2011 until you can find another way to raise the money. You come up with this, you spend $91,000, and what if it fails? What are you going to do then? How are you going to come up with the money for all these services that you say that we need? How about firing 10 people instead of continuing hiring people that you continue to do? Why don't we see if we're getting the most bang for our buck and save some money that way? 7 out of 10 people sounds really good, but when you understand it's only 900 people out of 36,000, you think that's going to equate a yes vote in the ballot? I don't think so. I would vote no.
Thank you. Kenny Mace?
I'm going to cut this apart. I, for one, will not support any tax increase until such time as the city can prove it's spending each and every dollar wisely. To date, that is not the case. The fact that this tax is destined for a general fund, which requires a simple majority vote, is also a reason not to vote for this tax increase. If this city really knew what it was doing, there would be no reason not to make this a special tax with money being dedicated to specific areas, thereby requiring a 2/3 vote to pass. In the survey results, you talk about preserving 911 response time. But in the next paragraph, you say, unfortunately, 80% of our responses don't meet the standards. You talk about maintaining our local roads. But then you say that 30% of our roads are rated poor or failed. Are we going to maintain or are we going to enhance? Maintaining is not good enough. What about those streets in the cities that aren't maintained because they don't meet the minimum county standards and therefore they're not maintained? This includes all of downtown Wildomar and most of Sedco. Oversight committee is going to be a joke. You have a hard time filling your Measure Z committee now. And the planning commission you can't fill for squat. A supermajority vote of the city council is required to approve this measure on the ballot. Why not a supermajority of the citizens to pass it? The second resolution is designed to confuse. On one hand, you commit money to 4 areas, but then you leave yourself an out by the wording, whereas under law the proposed tax is a general purpose tax, which means you can change your mind and spend it anywhere you want. The whole thing is fraught with deception and trickery.
Monty?
Okay, this 2-minute thing is killing me. I timed myself. This is 2 minutes and 32 seconds, so I'm going to have to leave a good chunk of it out. So I'm just going to give you the highlights. If you want more, I'll be glad to tell you later. Tell me again why we became a city. I've used that line with one of you that I talk to on the phone every once in a while, and I do it in jest. But I do recall when we were voting to become a city, we were told point blank that we could be a viable, financially viable city without raising taxes. We just celebrated 10 years, and what are we talking about? Raising taxes. So we can essentially provide what I consider the bare minimum level of municipal services. Okay, I got that out of the way. Actually, I was going to do a little jest here. Why not disincorporate? I know that'll never happen, but why not? A great question would have been on that survey, would you rather disincorporate or pay more taxes? Put that on the ballot. Okay, that's the humor part of my presentation. That said, I'll probably grudgingly vote for the new tax, because as I have been told, we're here now, and I do want basic public services, at least as good as those we enjoyed and others still enjoy in the unincorporated areas of the county. One point I want to make, in case people aren't aware, in the unincorporated areas of the county, Highway Patrol does traffic enforcement. So the numbers in the county are much better than they appear to be when you add that factor in. Like I said, I'll grudgingly vote for it. I'd be more inclined to vote for it, it kind of hits on what Kenny said, if it was for a special purpose tax, rather than just being shoved into the general fund. I know the Citizens Oversight Committee, because I served for 2 years on the Major Z one. I know that citizen oversight without upfront budget review is a toothless tiger, the inclusion of which in the ballot measure serving only to snooker fence-sitting voters. I do have a huge issue with the proposed ballot measure wording. Words have meaning. Are we going to improve public safety services as the conceptual ballot presented at your April City Council meeting stated? Or are we going to just maintain the current inadequate service levels as the ballot measure before you tonight states? The same concern applies to the wording in the related proposed resolution.
Thank you, Mike.
I'll probably vote for improved. I won't vote for maintain.
Thank you. Joseph Morbido.
I only have a couple of handwritten notes on this one. That's where my public comment was, so somewhere it's lost in your stuff, so. Let's see. Okay, as you know, I'm running for city council, and but I'm not elected yet, and if it's certain things I would weigh in on because it should be, people should know my positions on it. But I'm not going to weigh in on every topic, even on nights like this where it's, or even on nights not like this where it's not as busy. So, I would just say for this, that with taxes, I'm sure all of you up there, you're all conservative, you're not for taxes. And I'm pretty much fiscally conservative and I'm not for taxes. However, since I'm running for city council, the city needs more money. And there is no money trees. So I'm in favor of this being put on the ballot and letting the people decide. But the voters do need to understand that if they feel that we're already being taxed to death, okay, we are. But if we reject this, there's going to be a big hole in the budget that will probably take years to figure out how to fill. And so there'll be ramifications for that. Anyway, so that's my thoughts.
Joseph, sorry, I did miss your card. I got it here. We'll take public comment again right after this item, okay?
Sure.
All right. Next up, Patrick Ellis.
Good evening, Mayor Benoit, Council, staff. Patrick Ellis, President and CEO of the Wildomar Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for allowing me the time. I'll be quick. Obviously tonight we've had a lot of people talk about the homeless issue that is not funded in any way, shape, or form, which Police Chief Ann spoke about eloquently tonight. There's a huge need for this to be placed on the ballot. What you're being asked tonight is not to vote for this one way or the other, is just whether the residents and the businesses should have an opportunity to vote for this. We believe it should. I do believe that, you know, what we've talked about tonight having to do with the issues of cost to the city on an overall standpoint over the last 10 years, I think people need to realize and understand that there has been huge mandates set down from the state to every single city in this area without any kind of funding whatsoever. So regardless of what we do as community leaders here and promoting the businesses and all of the different mechanisms that generate funding for the city, the state keeps mandating that each city do more and more without providing funding for that. So that puts each city within this area in a hole whatsoever, you know, every single day. So this gives us the position that we're in now. So obviously, an opportunity like this, give the citizens, the businesses an opportunity to voice their opposition or their support of growing this city, giving this city what it needs to create a safe environment and to create an opportunity for everyone to be successful. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Andy Morris.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Andy Morris. I'm up here on behalf of myself. All my comments are my own. Two things. First of all, the reason I thought we came to Bee City is to have local control of everything that we do, and putting something like this on the ballot gives the residents the option of how they want to run their city, what they want for their city. So it makes sense to me that it's on the ballot and that the residents are given the opportunity. You know, when we became a city, we thought we were going to have a Walmart and all this sales tax was going to help us grow the city. But we have all these people, well, some people that sue the city and the businesses that want to bring business that would create revenue for the city, which would have helped offset a lot of these costs that we're looking to now put a sales tax on. So I think we want to maintain this nice, sleepy, homey town without growing these businesses. Well, guess what we'll need to do? We got to put stuff like this on ballots and see if the resident, what they want. Whether they want the sales tax or not. So I think it's good to put it on the ballot and let the people decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Nee.
Good evening. Brad Neat, CEO of Southwest Healthcare, which is Inland Valley and Rancho Springs. First, I want to thank you for the pavement of Inland Valley Road. To give you some idea of how many residents or how many people cross and utilize that road, we see approximately 50,000 people in our ER at Inland Valley on an annual basis. So much needed improvement. We appreciate that. Relative to the tax, I too support putting it on the ballot. We have had a tremendous spike in public safety issues within Inland Valley. Just to give you a sense of, those of you that have visited Inland Valley over the years realize we've limited access now. We have visitor badges, we have added security guard, all at the cost of about $100,000 a year additional, of which we receive no additional revenue for that. So it becomes a big issue for us for security. I appreciate all that the police chief here has done and the response times, but we are seeing a continued need for increased response time with the number of incidents that we see, not only in our ER, but up on the floor. So again, we do appreciate what you do on a regular basis, both from the police chief and the city council, and we would support putting it on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's the last of the public comment cards I have on that, unless I missed any. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Council, comments, questions? Bridget?
Yeah, so of course no one likes taxes, and why we became a city exactly, Andy Moore said it perfectly, was local control. When we became a city and point blank, our CFA said we could become a viable city, and no one knew that the next year we're going to go into a downturn that would totally affect us, and no one knew that we'd have all those lawsuits constantly. One lawsuit will be done on a Thursday and the next lawsuit comes Monday. And then no one knew the governor was going to steal $12 million from us. So in 10 years, we sure have overcome a lot of challenges. And so like I said, of course, no one likes taxes, but this is something we need. And we need this going forward. We need this revenue every year going forward for the safety and the quality of life for all our residents.
Okay. Yeah, to me it's kind of cut and dry. It's giving the people, the voters, the people that live here, the opportunity to decide if they want that. If they don't want it, cool, we'll figure it out another way. If it passes, I like the idea that it being a general tax, meaning 50+1, and if the money's not spent correctly, then guess what, I won't get reelected. That's the way it's supposed to work. So, it's supposed to be that way. As far as polling, Gina, just so you know, when you go into like a website for a population size 38,000, with 95% confidence level with a 3% margin of error, you need 1,000 people. Your sample size should be 1,000 people. So that's just the math. Yeah, I think it's pretty cut and dry. And Gary, what did we lose? What did we get from the county when we incorporated?
What did we get from the county? The
For
300,000?
10 years? 300,000, right? Or,
Yes.
yeah, and that goes away.
The county saved over $3,000 a year by us incorporating.
Yeah.
So they shared that with us for 10 years. That's gone.
Yeah, and that goes away too after 10 years. So, I mean, this is one way to find revenue. If it doesn't work, if the citizens decide they don't want it, then they don't want it. But I think it's prudent of us to spend the money, have some kind of confidence that this will pass, because that's what we want, right? It would be even less likely to pass with the there's less confidence, right? We kind of go from there. So.
And I tend to agree with my other council members. You know, nobody wants more tax, but it's going to be necessary for the voters to make that decision. And Gina mentioned the population. That's men, women, and children. They only surveyed registered voters because that's who's going to decide. And Ben probably knows how many registered voters there actually are. 15,000, so 900 is a good amount. And it's up to you guys. It's not up to us. It's up to us whether to put it on the ballot and let you decide. And I remember how hard you worked to put the cityhood on the ballot and let the people decide. You know, and they made the decision. Not you, because you fought so hard to get it on, you helped, but they voted it in. And that's all we want to do, is give you citizens the right to make the decision.
Tim?
It was funny when I first got on this council, you know, being a business person, I think of things a whole lot different. And I got on here and I was all excited about all the things that we were going to do in this city. And all the push for Walmart and the push for all these different developments and commercial units and all this stuff. And then reality sets in. The endless lawsuits, the endless CEQA actions, the endless nonsense that you go through as a city. And then everybody expects you to just sit there and do nothing. Well, I've done nothing. I don't like taxes. I hate taxes. I think it should be a higher vote. But I'm also just only one person. I'm not the state of California who decides to put a gas tax on the citizens of the whole California and just says, stuff it, you guys are gonna all pay it. We're not that way. We're 5 of us. We don't make that decision. I would never make a decision to put a tax on people, ever. So my thinking is, that's why we put it on the ballot. I mean, that's why we spent the money. The money was spent for a survey. It wasn't just for only this tax thing. It was also the marijuana issue and everything else. So we got our money's worth out of a survey. I'm not for a tax, but I will put it on the ballot because if everybody wants it, and I'll be willing to pay the 1 cent. It doesn't bother me at all. I'm already paying it at Costco if I go to Temecula. Anything I buy in Temecula, so I try to buy almost everything out here in our city. If we could get the people to stop lawsuiting this, I wouldn't have to be driving anywhere else to go get all my stuff and pay these higher taxes everywhere else. 1 cent is not a big deal in my life. It's not going to change my career. It's not going to make any difference to me. But it does make a difference to other people. And I am a devout conservative, so I don't like taxes at all. And I'm sick of them. But I'm going to do what the people want. They surveyed, and they said they'd like to have that opportunity to put that on. It's worked for Temecula, it's worked for them. I even yelled at some of the councilmen down there. I don't know what you guys are doing, why you're letting the people, but the people decided that they wanted to pay it, and now they're paying it, and they're getting the benefits. All brand new streets, new park stuff. I mean, they have a lot more people. They got a mall, they got all those different things, so. They do, they have all of our tax dollars. I'm going down there buying stuff. So if things would have been a lot more rosier, because believe me, from our side of this bench over here, it ain't rosy. This looks like fun. For $400 a month, I can come up with a whole lot more better things to do than to sit up here and try to make it rosy for everybody.
It's actually
There is no rosy thing here. The last year when I was the mayor, I struggled every day. All I thought about was people being harassed in our community because we didn't have the police. Every day. So thank God it was my turn to be done with being mayor on December 31st, and I was excited that Ben took over. Because let me tell you something, for $400 a month, you can't pay us enough for that kind of a thing. To worry about those type of things every day for a year. That's why I have more gray hair after 8 years of being here than I ever had before. But kid you not, this is all we think about. This is all we deal with. Every day, we get emails from the city. We're trying to figure out ways to pay for things. There's a lot of things going on in our city. Little strips of grass, all these things. We know. You guys have no idea because we're not allowed to tell you anything at this point, but it's coming. But these are things that are going to have to pay. You're going to make money to pay for it. So with reluctance, I'm going to go ahead and do this because I'm going to let everybody else decide if they want to pay it. I have the means. It's not going to kill me. But there are people that it's going to hurt. But, you know, as a whole, we are a city. We got stuck to by the state of California, took all our money, and we're just barely getting any of it back. And our sheriff and our fire, those guys have been very good about it. As far as I'm concerned, I would spend all my money on those two items because all my job is to do is protect. So when I was mayor, the sweat and the tears and the suffering at night that you didn't see because we were sitting here, that's the stuff you don't see. So the thankless job, we do it because we still love our city and we're glad that we are a city. We didn't want to be everybody else's city. So with that, I will vote for it. So that's all I have to say. I just figured everybody should. It would have been a lot nicer if we would have had a Walmart and all these different things because this would have not even been an issue for me. I would have said, no, absolutely not.
And local control too. It's not, it's ours.
Yep, it's ours. We own it.
That change, you know.
Well,
that'll make a motion.
well,
No, you
I'd
want to talk
like
too?
a chance to talk.
Oh, we
Yeah,
don't
you
know.
got your chance. My
Did you write this? No, I'm just kidding.
Hold on now. You know, you all bring up excellent points, and I completely agree with 99% of them. You told me though there would be a raise when I became mayor. You still owe me that penny.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
You know, it's really, you know, coming into this 8 years ago when I first got on this council, even then I knew that we might have rocky roads ahead. When the state took VLF out from underneath us, it put us on a really difficult path. We've just finally got that back, but we're $12.5 million short that we'll never get back any other way. And if we just ignore that, we will always be in that $12.5 million deficit. And so I feel very strongly that this is a way for us to move that pendulum back the other way, and we've got to. When I look at our police service response times, our fire service response times, our needs that I've known since I got on council years ago, hey, we need a fire station on the side of the freeway. Can't pay for it. This is the only chance we get to go down this path and hopefully start paying for that. Police services, how do we improve them? We have to pay for what we use. You know, and you know, at the end of the day, there's a regular rate increase with PERS coming back and everything else on the police side that increased costs have regularly been 5–6% every year. On top of that, the county's talking about pushing down on all of our cities another 7% increase, and we're learning about that just right now. But we need to do better. We need to actually have more services. My biggest concern is one of the things brought to my attention tonight when I do see the word maintain over and over again when we're talking about police services. Can we find in the resolution somewhere we're actually saying we're increasing our police services? Is that in the resolution?
On the enhancement, or it says enhancement of police. I was looking at that right now.
Title, but is it in the actual resolution that we've got in the language?
Whereas.
Tom?
Yeah, it's on the second one. So it's resolution of the City Council, the City of Wildomar, California, stating its intention to expend all proceeds of the proposed transactions and use tax, sales tax, on the November 6, 2018 ballot for the enhancement of police and fire services, road maintenance, and homelessness solutions within the City of Wildomar if the tax is approved by the voters.
That's the title.
You're looking at the.
I'm actually looking in the actual resolution language, and what I'm seeing in there does not seem to match up. That's what I'm concerned about.
The ballot measure question in the first resolution uses the word maintain.
Right.
No, page 257, maintaining local police / fire protection, preserving 911 response times, maintaining local streets and fixing potholes, passed and approved and adopted in this, 11 days of July 2018.
I'd need that to say increase.
I will tell you that that word was the word used in the surveys, and our consultant would probably want us to keep the word in the surveys. At least that's my understanding.
Well, I recognize that in the ballot question, but the resolution at least. I feel we gotta at least have it there, because that's what I wanna see this money do. We need to improve those services.
So Monty, what you were bringing up, I initially read the resolution when I saw the word enhancement of police. I thought that word carried on throughout. It does not. So I'll have to look at that too.
So the word enhancement is in the title.
No, yeah, it doesn't carry through with the rest.
You got
of
it.
the sentence.
But as Councilmember Moore read, it's in the title of your second resolution.
So yeah, I get that piece, but for the title piece, enhancement of police and fire services, that's the enhancement of that. I would say road maintenance and improvements.
Well, being that we only make $400 a month and we paid $91,000 to a company to help us.
I'm not changing the ballot question. I'm not trying to change the ballot question. I'm talking about the resolution we're going to pass tonight that says what we're going to spend our money on. What we're telling the citizens we're going to spend our money on, I think should say, just have some more meatier verbiage, if that makes sense.
Right.
Spending priorities of the resolution.
Yeah, I'm not
Right.
talking about the ballot question itself.
On page 257, item B, subsection A, instead of maintaining, I think that should say improving local police and fire protection.
Then just whoever makes the motion on that resolution should include that change.
Would you say then, maintaining and improving?
No, just strike maintaining and put in improving local police and fire protection.
Okay, and then
A resolution on page
Yeah.
257.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it matters. I think to me it's more personal the title for the road maintenance piece on the second resolution, number 37, road maintenance and improvements. Is that, or am I mixing apples and oranges here?
I'm more worried about police and fire protection. That's where we've got to have, I mean, if we always live with where we're at.
I'm good with you with that. I'm good with I agree. I'm also, in addition to that, I'm talking the road maintenance piece. Road maintenance and improvements, or am I confusing words here?
I think the road maintenance and improvements, you know, if I had to ask which one is our highest priority, it's public safety.
Oh, yeah.
So I would say let's improve public safety. If all we can do with all that money is just improve public safety, but we maintain our roads, then I think that's not too far off of where we were at.
That's a better way to say it.
So let's leave that second part alone and just change the first one. We're talking about police and fire, and make that improving.
$363 a month. All right, that's fine. I can live with it.
Okay. Want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion with Mayor Benoit's.
We need two separate.
Yeah, two separate motions.
That's
So
on the
start
second part.
Okay.
with the first
We
resolution.
need a motion on resolution 2018-36.
I move to approve that one, as written.
A motion from Tim, second from Marcia.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That item moves 5-0.